Okay, so she's gonna sail down to San Francisco?
Yep.
And how long do you think this voyage is gonna take?
Probably about 2 years.
The Miniboat program from the Columbia River Maritime Museum is a robust education program that has now educated over 1,200 students in both the United States and Japan. We challenge the students to cooperatively design, build, launch, and then track a GPS-enabled autonomous sailboat with the hopes that it will cross the Pacific Ocean. Each class in the United States builds 2 boats. One is to be launched from the coast of North America, and the other I personally take over to Japan and hand over to their partner class.
This program is teaching kids way more than just building a boat. This is STEAM, this is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, all wrapped into one with an international relations element. They're learning so many different skills, and they're learning what that value can bring back to their own life.
We learned teamwork and perseverance.
It was fun to be kind of hands-on.
There are so many different learners in a classroom that we can engage all 30 students with this one tool. But what I think makes a mini boat extra special is it's all hands-on, and the students get to make every decision themselves. The quartermaster department studies ocean currents and weather patterns to look for the most perfect spot to launch their mini boat. The keel department has one of the most important jobs. If their mini boat flips upside down and that keel is not engineered perfectly, their mini boat won't right up and continue on its voyage. The sail department and the deck department have complete creative control of what that mini boat's gonna look like.
If it's facing this way and that sail is pointing that way, it won't get sun at all.
Kids are strengthening skills. They also are learning about new skills and really opening their minds.
Really, it's the value we get back when these young people who as 5th graders learned how to do international relations, they learned how to work on teams and projects, they built their confidence, and a few years later they're going to be in high school challenging themselves more than they might have otherwise, and then they're going to enter the workforce. We're trying to invest in the future.
Any problems we see with this?
No, don't fold it, because then it might.
As a mini boat program, we're actually preparing students for future careers. We're letting them try out all these different jobs and see where they fit best.
It's important for Pacific Power to be involved in the mini boat program because of the enriching value that this program brings to students, to stimulate curiosity, to kind of think outside the classroom box. These are all the same types of skills that our employees need to have to be successful in this business.
It's our responsibility and opportunity to invest in changing the way that we educate, like we see in this Mini Boats program, where kids just get engaged. And when kids are engaged, they succeed. They want to come to school, they want to accomplish great things, and these programs show them that they can.
To hear parents and teachers say that they've seen their students transform and the year that the mini boat was in their classroom, I think is the greatest compliment to the program.
I hope this program does help students to start thinking about their future and what kind of career they might want. And for some of these students, if they choose to stay close to home, I think it's wonderful for them to learn about some of the things they could do right here.
Hopefully when they see these boats and they see the videos of them sailing away, they think, I built that. I built a boat that sailed across the Pacific Ocean when I was in 5th grade. The physical boats themselves are small, but the voyages they go on are mighty. The students who build them are small, but the things they accomplish when they come together are mighty.
Sorry, everyone, we're having slight technical difficulties with the mute here. Hang on just a quick second and we'll get Elisa back for you.
Hi friends. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now.
Perfect.
Great. Well, I will just start by introducing myself. I'm Elisa Dunlap, Pacific Power's Regional Business Manager for the North Coast of Oregon. That means I get to help our communities learn about what Pacific Power is doing, the programs we have to offer, and ways we can work together. This school year, I've had the absolute pleasure of working with our friends at the Columbia River Maritime Museum on its amazing mini boat program. For those of you new to today's live stream, it's a class project that involves students designing and building 5-foot sailboats that will sail across the Pacific. Each student has a really cool job. They might be a sail designer, a keel engineer, or a historian, which is really just a fancy way of saying they get to make videos for social media. There's even an international relations element, as students here in the Northwest are paired with a sister school in Japan. One boat is launched from here in North America, and the other is launched from Japan, with the hopes that each will cross the Pacific. While they are part of this fun and engaging project, they're also learning a bunch of STEAM skills. You've probably heard that term before. It stands for science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. If you were with us last week, you got to watch us give one of the mini boats that had come ashore a second chance, as we had relaunched it back into the Columbia River near Vancouver. We are now following its journey from Vancouver to Astoria, where we will relaunch it back to sea. This second chance launch is such a great demonstration of STEAM learning, where you're trying, failing, learning from what went wrong, and trying again. That's why we at Pacific Power are such big fans of this program. We really see students building the type of skills that will be useful no matter what they decide to do in the future. We've been excited to see what this mini boat can do, and today you are in for a real treat. We're going to get an update on its progress. Today, we're also going to hear from the National Weather Service, a part of NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a U.S. agency that focuses on ocean and weather conditions. We'll talk more about wind and how it's affecting our mini boat's voyage. And we also have someone with us from Educational Passages. This is the institute that helps us with the tracking software to help us keep track of those mini boats no matter where they are. So let's meet our guests for today. First, Nate Sandal, the Education Director for the Columbia River Maritime Museum. He's the one that gets to work directly with the students. Hi, Nate.
Hey everybody, Nate Sandal here, Education Director at the Columbia River Maritime Museum, coming to you live from our Science of Storms Gallery.
Thanks, Nate. We'll hear more from you later. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Trina Jensen, a senior meteorologist with the National Weather Service, a part of NOAA. Hi, Trina.
Hi, I'm Trina. I'm a meteorologist and I work for the National Weather Service. On a daily basis, I forecast the weather. I use satellite and computer models to figure out if it's going to be rainy, foggy, thunderstorms, and I provide these forecasts for airports, for wildfires, and for the ocean.
Great. Thanks so much, Trina. We can't wait to hear more from you later. And we'll get to talk to Cassie Stymus, Education Director for Educational Passages. Hi, Cassie. Where are you joining from today?
Hi, everyone. I'm over on the East Coast in New Hampshire, and I think I have to say this is the very first float down a river that I've seen any of our mini boats go. It's very exciting.
Great. Thanks, Cassie. Well, you'll help us learn a little bit more about the software behind our tracking later today. Trina, Cassie, and Nate together are going to share a lot with us about wind, currents, and mini boats. But we also have two student shipbuilders with us today, Kaylee and Danielle. They're both 5th grade students from Columbia City Elementary School. They're going to be along to learn with us today, and I hope share some of their firsthand insider information on what it's really like to participate in the mini boat program. Hi, Kaylee.
Hello.
Hi, Danielle. We'll hear more from our student shipbuilders later. But lastly, we are in for a real treat. I know you're all wondering where our mini boat is on its journey. And last week, we launched it from Vancouver, and it's on its way to Astoria, but it's had a few bumps along the road. So today, we are going to be joined by Mr. Boken, 7th grade teacher with Y East Middle School, and Mrs. Lewis, 5th grade teacher at Columbia City Elementary School. These two tell us where you are on the river today.
Hey, it's Mr. Boken, and it looks like our video got cut off, but we're out here on the beautiful Columbia River in the Pacific Northwest, and we are just offshore from Woodland, Washington. I'm out here with Yvonne Lewis, the teacher from Columbia City Elementary, of the 2 students who are on with us today, and also tugboat captain, boss tugboat captain, Luke Olson, and Yvonne's daughter, Emma Phillips.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Boken. We actually were able to catch your video. We can't wait to see a little bit more and hear from you about what's going on with that mini boat. Thanks again for being here with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Nate. Nate, over to you.
Hey, everybody. Nate Sandal back here at the Columbia River Maritime Museum. And let's first talk and review, what is a mini boat? A mini boat, they are 5 feet long, 5 foot tall fiberglass sailboats. They're about the size of a 5th grader. They weigh typically around 40 pounds, depending on the cargo the students choose and what electronics they try to outfit their boat with. They're put together from a kit that includes a sail and a mast and a keel and a hull and a deck. And over the fall, these students spent 8 weeks building 2 separate boats. And one of the boats was taken to Japan, and I launched it on Thanksgiving Day. The other boat we launched from somewhere on North America. And we're going to hear from one of our student quartermasters today who will help us walk through that. But I wanted to let you know about the inspiration behind the Columbia River Maritime Museum's mini boat program. In 2011, an earthquake followed by a terrible tsunami ravaged the east coast of Japan. 2 years after that tragedy, this fishing boat, the Saisho Maru, washed up on the Long Beach Peninsula and is now living in the Columbia River Maritime Museum's Brick Maritime Hall, where in a couple weeks you could all come and see it yourself. So we wanted to recreate that journey by launching boats from both coasts and seeing if they can cross the ocean, all the while teaching students STEAM skills and connecting them with their counterparts over in Japan. So who wants to hear about what our boat's been up to in the last week? Well, if you check it out, if you remember last week, we dropped it into the Columbia River at the Port of Vancouver off a Shaver tugboat. So she floated down that river all night till she landed on southern Sauvie Island at a big mansion, relaunched the next day and floated up to Nap Point on the Washington side, all the way up to Sauvie Island for a couple of days at different places, until finally, this morning, it made its way up to Woodland, Washington on Martin Island, where Mr. Boken picked it up off the beach this morning. What a pretty exciting journey, and we're just a little bit under halfway there. And I have some real faith that this mini boat's going to make its way all the way back to the Columbia River Maritime Museum, hopefully in time for our final episode next Friday. We hope you all join us at noon. So let's take a look at a couple of pictures of the Liberty journey down the Columbia. This picture was taken by Mr. Boken when he went to this mansion, walked up, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm a teacher and I think one of my students' boats landed in your backyard." And so he went, pulled it out, tried to push it into the river a couple of times, but with no luck. The next morning, Mr. Boken and his friend brought their boat out into the river and relaunched Liberty in the center of the channel, where she floated and was actually spotted by Luke Olson, a tugboat captain, who sent us this picture from the river. So we knew that she was stuck again, and the next day, Mr. Boken and his friend, they spent the whole weekend tracking down this mini boat, traveled back there, pulled it out and relaunched it, as you can see, into the Columbia River. So the next morning, after she floated all night, she was back on the beach. And a couple of our amazing educators here at the Columbia River Maritime Museum were up for a challenging adventure. So we sent them down to Sauvie Island, where they had to first locate the boat in what looks like a pretty non-easy way to get. Looks kind of marshy. You can see Miss Kelly and Julia there. And then Julia put on her waders and trudged out into the Columbia River with a life jacket and a mask and pushed that girl back out into the Columbia River, where she floated about 100 yards or a football field further downriver, where she beached again. So I told Mr. Boken, well, let's just leave it on the beach and see if it refloats overnight. But Mr. Boken, being Mr. Boken, would never let that stand. And he said, I'm going to head down there right now. And he jumped in his car and drove an hour out to Sauvie Island and found the mini boat right where it had landed. And Mr. Boken, being Mr. Boken, decided to do some engineering. He first tried to tie the mini boat to a log and roll it out into the river. That didn't work. So we all cheered that failure and tried to design and engineer something different. So Mr. Boken then went with a PVC pole to try to push it out there. These are really exciting videos, and Mr. Boken recorded them live, and they are all available on the CRMM Mini Boat Facebook page. So after that mini boat floated overnight, it refloated itself at high tide, it got stuck in an area where we were not allowed to go. So who do we call? The Sheriff's Department of Cowlitz County. And they came out to our rescue and personally escorted that mini boat, which is an awesome photo on that sheriff's vehicle, and helped Mr. Boken relaunch it the next day. Pretty exciting stuff. And we love when all of these different organizations come together to make this happen. So that's our update from what the mini boat has been up to over the last week. And now it's time to answer the question, what is wind? Wind is what powers our mini boats when they're in the ocean, unlike using the river current like we're doing today with Liberty. But what is wind really? Well, wind is caused by air flowing from high pressure to low pressure. As the sun warms the Earth's surfaces, the atmosphere warms too. Some parts of the Earth receive direct rays from the sun all year and are always warm. Other places receive indirect rays, so their climate is colder. Warm air, which weighs less than cold air, rises. Then cold air moves in to replace that rising warm air. This movement of air is what makes the wind blow. It's all about air pressure. Air pressure is a force exerted on the Earth's surface by the weight of the air. And as I said before, different pressures are caused by the unequal heating of the Earth. Atmospheric pressure, those variations are responsible for all of our different types of weather that we get. Sound complicated? Well, I'll be back later with a really cool experiment that can put all of this science into our eyes so we can see wind in action. So we'll be back in a little bit with that update, but right now we have senior meteorologist from the National Weather Service, Trina, here to talk a little bit about our local weather. Hey, Trina, how are you doing?
Hey, Nate, thanks for that great explanation of wind. And you're right, almost all weather is due to changes in air pressure or changes in temperature. Now, I have a really brief slideshow, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Just a second. And there we go. So I'm just going to briefly talk about winds in our local area. So the main weather feature that drives winds for the Northeast Pacific is this North Pacific high. Can you all see my pointer? There we go. In the summer, this takes up almost the whole ocean. So here is California and Oregon is up here, and then over here on the West Pacific is Japan. In the summer, the high pressure is very strong and very big. You can kind of think of it as like a bubble of warm air. And any storms that are trying to move towards the Pacific Northwest from Japan have a really hard time getting through this high because it's so strong, and they tend to go north. And so when we have high pressure, we tend to have dry weather, more pleasant weather, and more sunny weather. When we have low pressure, we kind of have cooler, moister weather. But now in the winter, this high pressure is not as strong. It's much narrower in the Pacific. And we have an Aleutian low set up north of us. Aleutian is named after these islands that come off of Alaska. Those are the Aleutian Islands. And this low pressure fuels any storms that are trying to move. It kind of makes them stronger. So they get strong enough that they can break through this high and get to the Pacific Northwest. But now, what about the winds? Well, as Nate described about high pressure is low pressure rises and high pressure sinks. So you have that, and you have the curvature of the earth and the earth rotating and how high pressure moves to low pressure. All of that makes air flow clockwise around high pressure and counterclockwise around low pressure. So now if we take that information back to the Northeast Pacific, this map here shows the average wind and pressure for the month of July. So the wind is represented by these arrows, and the arrows are blowing. So how they're blowing is pretty much how the air is moving. So where the arrow is pointing to is the direction of the wind. But in meteorology, we describe wind as the direction the air is blowing from. So I'll get to that in a little bit. So first, let's talk about in the summer. July is kind of the prime summer. So we have the big high over us. And you can see with the arrows, the air is moving around the high. So what that does for us is create north winds because the air is moving from the north to the south along the water. Now, if I was going to launch a mini boat or a drifter from the Columbia River and I wanted to get it to Japan and I wanted to take a southern route, I would probably try to launch that boat somewhere near the summer. So anywhere from May through September if I wanted to take a southern route. So in December, here's the average wind and pressure for December. You notice the high pressure is much further positioned further south than it was in July. So like I said, this opens up the door for storm tracks to come in. So the average winds here are right by the coast. It's hard to see because the arrow is so small, is from the south. So the air is blowing from the south to the north. And even though, so the smaller arrows suggest that the wind speed is lighter. It's a little deceiving for December because if we have any storms coming through, the winds are going to be a lot stronger than that, especially with fronts. And you're going to have south winds ahead of a cold front, and then behind a cold front, you're going to have strong northwest winds. So it's a little bit more turbulent to try to get a boat, a mini boat or a drifter in the winter because of those storms. It may be a little bit more challenging. But if I want to try to take the northern route and go up to Alaska down towards Japan, I would want to launch my boat closer to the winter. So anywhere from October to February. So that's all I have about the local winds.
Hey, that's great, Trina. And I think you kind of answered that age-old question when you say, oh, look at that west wind, and everybody always have to think about it. Does that mean it's coming from the west or blowing to the west? So Trina, I think you just really made a lot of people out there a lot smarter with that. And speaking of smart people, we have with us a very amazing student from Columbia City Elementary School who is part of a very important program. Kaylee, are you available right now?
Yep.
So can you tell us what department were you on in the mini boat program?
I was a quartermaster.
Great. And could you tell us what was a quartermaster's job?
So a quartermaster's job is to write the finder's instructions, and we track the wind and water currents. And we also choose the location to launch the mini boat.
Great. So your mini boat that you launched from North America was called Filbert. Where did you decide to launch your mini boat from?
We decided to launch Filbert near San Diego.
And why did you launch her so far south?
Because we wanted her to catch the equator current, and the equator current should connect to the Japan current.
Excellent. And another question, how did you get, I mean, I don't assume you didn't, like, you know, walk your mini boat down to the Southern Ocean. How did you get it there?
USCGC Steadfast took our mini boat there.
That's right, the Coast Guard cutter Steadfast, which is moored right out in front of the museum on the 17th Street Pier. You guys got to bring it out there and tour the ship. What was your favorite part of that tour of the ship?
I did get interviewed.
Yes, you did. I saw a great picture of that. So I wanted, I have some questions for Trina, and I know Kaylee does because she was a quartermaster, which was in charge of navigation. And I hope a lot of our audience has questions too. So please just go ahead and type out your questions in the chat, and then we will have Trina and some other students answer those questions in a little bit. But Trina, I'm going to start off with a couple of questions for you, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
So we talked about the northern route and the southern route. Do you think, I mean, which one is maybe more dangerous for the boat, could have more hazards? And which way do you think might be a little bit faster to get the mini boat there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as far as speed, it almost seems like there's a shorter distance if you can go up north. And I'm just speaking purely for weather. I'm not as familiar with the sea currents. But the north is where the storm track comes, as I was explaining earlier. And that can make it really interesting. That boat can have quite a ride. So they're going to likely experience very strong winds, and it could be going in the right direction, but at times it's going to probably take the boat in a direction it doesn't want to go, as well as there are going to be really large seas. And plus, there's a lot of little islands up to the north that boat can get kind of trapped, and the winds closer to land acts differently than those large-scale ocean winds that I was showing, because the shape of the land also determines where the wind is. So anytime those boats or drifters gets close to the land, it's going to have some problems. So although that might be a faster route, I don't know if that would be the most successful route. I think you'd have a better chance of getting the boat to Japan if you go south. If you take the north winds, and especially if you can start with some northeast winds to get the boat away from the land, have it move south down as close to near Hawaii as possible. Then as you get closer to the equator, you can catch the trade winds. And those are strong east winds that will take that boat all the way across the Pacific. And then timing to get those back to the southwest winds towards Japan is another challenge. And the Pacific also has a lot of islands where that boat might get caught up in some local currents or local winds. And so either way, the boat is going to have a great adventure.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's really interesting you said that, because a mini boat that took the northern route crashed into a volcano in Alaska, and a mini boat that took the southern route crashed on a little teeny atoll in the Republic of Kiribati, right in the equatorial Pacific. But both were amazing adventures. And also, Trina, thanks for that expert advice about the summer southern launch, because we have Liberty to launch here in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll wait for those northeast winds to let her go. Kaylee, are you there as a quartermaster? Do you have some questions for Trina? Oh, I think you're muted a little bit, but if I can read lips, I think you might have asked, what are the strongest winds that we get here in the Pacific Northwest?
Oh, hey, Kaylee, that's a great question. So typically our winds over the ocean kind of are, we get 20 knots here and there, or let's see, 30 miles per hour. Sometimes we get 50 miles per hour. But the strongest winds that I know of happen during a storm. A lot of people that are from this area know this storm. It's called the Columbus Day Storm, and it happened in October of 1962. And the highest wind that we have reported was from a little town called Mount Hebo. Actually, no, it's not a town. It's Mount Hebo on the Coast Range, right off of Northwest Oregon. And the wind gust measured 170 miles per hour, which is very strong. And that same storm at the Portland airport measured 92 miles per hour. So to put that in perspective, a EF4 tornado, if that was a tornado, it wasn't a tornado, but if it was, it would be in the same category as an EF4 tornado, which does a lot of destruction.
Great. Hey, Kaylee, if you could unmute yourself, I think you might have a couple more questions for Trina.
Why does the wind move from west to east?
That's a good question. So our most common wind here in the Pacific Northwest is that west wind. And that, if you think back to what Nate was talking about, temperature differences and differences in pressure, the ocean here is relatively much cooler than the land is. And so as the land heats up, the air rises and it creates a low pressure over land. And even though it might not be a strong low as in a storm, the pressure over land is usually lower than the pressure over the ocean. And as Nate explained, high pressure always wants to move to low pressure. So we typically have those west winds. Now we don't always, like I said, you want some northeast winds. But most of the time we have west winds.
Great. And Kaylee, we have time for one more question, and I'm sure you have a lot more to go, but pick your favorite question and let's ask Trina one more.
What is the coolest thing you've ever done as part of your job?
Yeah, so my job has given me a lot of great opportunities, but I'd have to say the coolest thing is early on in my career. So I started my career in Hawaii because I went to the University of Hawaii. And the National Weather Service has a bunch of rain gauges and temperatures that we service. And when I was familiarizing myself with the agency, I got to go along to service a rain gauge, but it was in an unusual place. It was on an island that's called Coconut Island. So we had to take a boat out to the island. But Coconut Island is actually where, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show Gilligan's Island, but it was from the 60s. It's a really fun show where a boat gets abandoned and people get isolated on an island. But that show, this opening scene for that show was filmed on Coconut Island. So when we landed the boat, there was a big lagoon. So now the island is used from the university for research. But what they're researching is sharks. So to get to the rain gauge, I had to cross a little bridge over a lagoon that was filled with tiger and hammerhead sharks. It was super cool.
That sounds super cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Senior Meteorologist from the National Weather Service, Trina, for your expert advice. We're very lucky to have you. And Kaylee, some amazing questions. And it seems like you made all the right choices as a quartermaster after hearing from our expert. So we're back here with part 2 of our lesson about wind. And to kind of put things into perspective, because remember how complicated this is, high pressure, low pressure? What I want you to think about is air, kind of like me in bed, wants to spread out with as much room as I can get. So right now in this jar, the air pressure is equal inside the jar and outside of the jar. But we're using this pump, and we're going to suck the air out of this jar and lower the pressure inside. But if you know anything about marshmallows, you know that there's air trapped inside. So what is going to happen to that air when it has more room? Why don't you give a prediction to the person next to you, or just shout it out loud at home, and we'll see what happens. As you can see, that air inside of the marshmallow is starting to expand as the pressure changes. And we'll suck out all of the air out of this bell jar. Now for the real exciting part. We are going to make wind. And the way we're going to do that is unhook this tube. And the high pressure is going to want to spread out that air. It's going to zoom into the jar, and you're going to hear it. But what's going to happen to that marshmallow when the air comes rushing in? Is it going to catch on fire? Is it going to explode? Is it going to shrink? Is it going to do a dance? I don't know. Make your prediction, and we'll find out. In 3, 2, 1. Whoa! Look at that marshmallow. As the pressure came in, it squished it down. And if you were able to hear, we just made wind. All right, well, that's about how wind works. And we have another student expert with us right here. And that is Danielle. Danielle, are you with us?
Yeah.
Hey, oh, and look, there's a picture of you on the screen as well doing your job, which was?
I was on the social media team.
And what exactly did you do on the social media team?
So on the social media team, so we took photos and you also took videos, and then I would give them to Mr. Nate and he would post them on the Facebook page.
Oh, and you made some really incredible videos. We're actually going to see one of those here in just a minute. But I want to ask you, what did you look forward to every week when we would come in, Miss Julia and I would come into your class and do the mini boat program?
It was really which assignment you were going to give us.
And did you learn any new skills during the year?
Probably how to work a phone better.
Which is always a good skill, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. You had 9 different teams or departments that you could choose to work on as part of the mini boat program. If you had to do it all over again, would you stick with the social media team or would you try a different department?
I would probably choose a different department just because I did this one this year and I know how to do it already. I'd probably want to do something else next year, or if it happened next year.
Excellent. Well, we are actually going to see one of your amazing videos right now, which is actually highlighting some of the different departments.
Hi, my name is Dakota, and I'm in the quartermaster's group.
What are you guys doing on the computer?
Well, I'm making finder's instructions, so whoever finds the boat will know what to do. And yeah.
Cool. Who else is in your group?
Kaylee and Jackson.
Do you want to pull them over?
Kaylee!
What are you guys painting?
Trees, mountains, and rivers.
What are you painting on?
A sail.
How many are you painting?
2 of them.
Cool. Go ahead.
My name is Annabelle. Hi, my name's Finn. Hi, my name is Lily. And we are the deck department.
What are you guys doing?
We're finishing our photos for the deck today.
Where are you gonna put the deck? Where are you gonna put the picture?
On the deck.
Where's the deck at?
On the top of the boat.
Cool. Are you the only? Is it only you 3 in the group?
No. We have one more participator that's right there. Just a second.
Are you taking pictures or are you videoing? is Bella. Hello, my name is Madison. Hello, my name is Layla. What department are you in? Keel department. What are you guys doing right now? Painting the keel. Where is the keel gonna go? On the boat. What does the keel help with? So the boat can sink. It helps it stir. It helps it steer. Okay, cool. Thanks. Hello, my name's Tanner. Hello, my name's Julie. Hello, my name's Austin. What department are you in? What are you guys doing right now? We're doing design. How many, where are you doing it at? The boat. How many, are you doing just one boat? We're doing two boats. Is there two on each boat, or are we all working on a team on one boat? We're doing two on one boat, two on the other boat. Cool, thanks.
Wow, Danielle, that was pretty amazing. And I've seen that video a lot of times. So good work. Now it's really exciting time. We're going to go and check in on the river with Mr. Boken and Danielle and Kaylee's teacher, Mrs. Lewis. Mr. Boken, are you available?
I am available. And Nate is asking to check in with Mrs. Lewis. Let me flip the camera around here. So wave hello and give a shout. And
perfect. And it looks like you are with our mini boat hero, Luke Olson, who has taken part of quite a few rescues with you this week. Pretty exciting time, huh?
We are here with Luke. It is an exciting time. We also have Hooch from the movie Turner and Hooch out here with us today, keeping us safe.
So Oregon. All right, well, let's get that boat in the water, Mr. Boken, and let's see her float back to Astoria.
It's a beautiful day for a launch. Here we go. Off into the water she goes. So the Liberty at this point has traveled 25 river miles from the Henry J. Kaiser Memorial Shipyard. And here she is now just slightly north of Woodland, Washington. What we're looking at across from the Liberty is Deer Island in Oregon, looking upriver down towards Vancouver, where she was originally launched, and across now over to Washington. So farewell, Liberty. We'll see you soon, and I'll send it back to you, Nate.
Great. Well, thanks for that update. It looks like you guys are having a really rough day out there on the river, but it's a pretty boring job.
Yeah, it's hard.
There.
It's hard to be out here in this beautiful setting with, you know, a nice light breeze and good company. You know, sorry, everybody else. We're doing it for you. We're falling on the
well,
sword.
it's looking good. And we'll check in with you next week on our final episode, Mr. Boken. Thanks so much, and be safe out there. Thanks again,
Thank you,
Mrs.
Nate.
Lewis and Ms. Lope. All right, so now we're going to check in with the Director of Educational Passages, Cassie. And Cassie and I meet about once a week, and it's the one person that I can just nerd out about mini boats, and we just talk and talk and talk. Cassie, are you available to teach us about some really cool tools Educational Passages has available on their website?
Always.
Great. Well, could you show us or maybe tell us about this PAT tool that you guys have developed?
Absolutely. There's two tools that I'd like to show you today where you can track your mini boat and also see the winds and currents and sea surface temperature that's around your mini boat when it's sailing. So here on the educationalpassages.org/CRMM is the CRMM fleet map. And you can see those boats that you guys had mentioned earlier that head north and some that go south. But the really cool tool is to see some of those vectors and things that Trina was showing, but in real time.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Kaylee, are you with us right now?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I think Cassie might have a couple of questions about your mini boat that you quartermastered, Filbert.
Yeah, so let's scroll in. Here on the tool, that you can see all these boats sailing all around the world. These are the black icon dots. If we scroll in on Filbert, I've moved the timeline to March 6th, which is when Filbert was launched, right?
Yes.
So if I scroll in, well, which layer would you like to see, Kaylee?
Let's go with waves.
Waves. So if I click on waves here, you can see that the colors correlated here will match up with what the wave information is right now. Do you know what?
Well, I want to see winds too, Cassie. Could you show us winds after the waves too?
Definitely. So if we look at winds, especially after looking at waves, Kaylee, what do you think drives that mini boat more, wind or currents?
I think wind.
Wind. So let's scroll in a little bit more here and click on where Filbert is right now. So here you can see the wind is 6.9 knots and Filbert is traveling at about half a knot.
Wow. So, hey, Cassie, could you do me a favor, actually? Could you make the winds have the moving arrows for us? I get kind of excited about moving arrows.
Yeah, so here we can slide back to when the mini boat was launched to March 6th. And if we press play, it's going to change that layer over time.
Wow, this
is got a lot of data that it's loading, so it can take a minute.
Well, and Cassie, I know, I spend, maybe 15 minutes to an hour a day nerding out on this site, checking out all of the mini boats. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, if I actually go back to click on when Filbert was launched, she was actually clocked at traveling 3 knots at one point.
Wow. It's faster than I can swim. Wow, that is an amazing, amazing journey. And so when it was launched, the captain of the Coast Guard cutter Steadfast, he waited a couple extra days until those trade winds were right in the middle of the trade winds, and they were just ripping towards the other side of the ocean. And we can really see 3 knots. That's as fast as like a real sailboat can sail sometimes.
Yeah. So Filbert's been at sea now for 90 days and has traveled over 5,500 kilometers. So how about another prediction for folks listening and joining us? I'm wondering, over the next week, what direction do you think the Filbert is going to travel in, and how far will she sail in 1 week?
Hey, Kaylee, do you have a guess about what direction she's going to go?
We're hoping that she goes east.
Hey, Danielle, do you have a prediction about how far, which direction she'll go?
Maybe east?
That's what I'm thinking too. Cassie, what do you think?
Yeah, so if I scroll in here a little bit more, you can actually move the slider to a day or so ahead of us and use this as a prediction tool where the winds are going. But don't forget to check waves and currents and temperature, because all of those things affect how the mini boat moves.
Yeah, and I've seen some of our mini boats have had waves that are over 15 feet high. Can you imagine what this little 5-foot mini boat is looking like in 15-foot waves? But Cassie, the good thing is Kaylee and Danielle's classmates engineered this boat really well. And if she's flipped upside down, she's flipped herself right side up. So I think that our students might have a couple of questions for you, Cassie, because you as well have a really cool job. Kaylee, do you have any questions for Cassie? Or Danielle, maybe do you have a question?
Yeah. What is the best part of your job?
The best part is connecting all of you all around the world. Having boats not only in the Pacific, they're all over here in the Atlantic, which is the ocean I'm closest to. And we even have one that's almost headed to Australia.
Cool. Do you have another question, Danielle?
Yeah. What is the hardest part of your job?
Hardest part, I think I'd have to say, is when I have to tell someone that their GPS has stopped reporting. That could be really hard to do. And Nate and I have had to do that quite a few times with some of the mini boats. But there's always hope, because there's been some awesome stories that Nate and others can share about those boats that wash up thousands of miles later.
Great. And yet, it is sad when they stop reporting, but we know through experience, right, Cassie, that just because it stops reporting doesn't mean that they're at the bottom of the ocean. They could be upside down, still traveling. They could have had their GPS damaged. I've even had a student think that maybe a bird had some droppings over the GPS that's messing with it, so it wasn't able to report. We never know. Hey, Kaylee, can you join us really quick? So I have a question for you. Being a quartermaster, if you could pick to be a senior, which you have to work really hard to get to be the senior level meteorologist, or to have Cassie's job as the director of educational passages, helping everybody get their boats and helping other people kind of figure out all these cool winds, which job do you think would be more exciting?
Probably working at educational passages.
Yeah, maybe not as much math involved as being a meteorologist. Well, I am so pleased that we were all able to come together. But Cassie, I have one final question for you. The Columbia River Maritime Museum has launched 25 mini boats as this, well, actually 26, but one came back ashore, the Liberty, and we're going to relaunch her. How many mini boats has Educational Passages launched into the oceans since its founding?
So Filbert was actually the last one, and it was the 144th mini boat over the last 10 years that we have launched to sea. All of those boats over 10 years have traveled over 200 voyages and 1.2 million kilometers. So
wow, that is fascinating. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for joining us and your help, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon. And at this point, I want to kick it back to Elisa from Pacific Power, and hopefully we have some questions.
We sure do. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Cassie, and our student shipbuilders, and also to Trina. So all of you may be getting some questions headed your way. All right, so first, Cassie, we're going to go back to you. What inspired the creation of the mini boat kit?
Oh, that's a good one. Before I joined Educational Passages a couple years ago, the mini boat project was put together by a sailor who didn't want to sail anymore and wanted to provide the same opportunity in a new and exciting way. And so he thought, if I make a smaller version and I put a GPS on it, I can send it to different lands, and it has grown ever since.
That's great. So on that note, do you do anything with the data that's collected from these mini boats and their journeys?
Yeah, we're starting to look more and more about using these mini boat data tracks to learn more about ocean currents and wind and all these special things that they're able to capture when things aren't out there, or their satellites. Having the boats really on the water collecting real-time information is really important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cassie. So Trina, we're going to actually go to you for this next question. So you have talked about some of the research that goes behind what you do on a daily basis. How did you become interested in weather?
It wasn't a direct path. I had a couple of other majors before. I was marine biology and Sanskrit. But I've always liked math and physics. And so I wanted a career that applied math and physics. And one day I was surfing and it was raining. The rain moved. It was sunny. Then there was a rainbow. And then a perfect wave came. I had an amazing ride on my surfboard, and it just all clicked that weather was the main driver for all of that I was experiencing. And so I went ahead and took an introductory to meteorology course and loved it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And what a great story to share with our young students and people watching of something that was a hobby that inspired what is now your career.
Yeah,
Back to our student shipbuilders. So Kaylee, this one is actually going to be for you. What do you think you will remember most about your experience this year with the mini boat program?
I think probably everything.
Is there one in particular moment that just was really special for you? Did you by any chance get to talk to somebody at a university about a launch site potential for your boat?
Mm-hmm. We did talk to an OSD scientist.
Wonderful. Well, again, that's connecting these students with future learning opportunities and really opening their eyes to other possibilities. So Danielle, for you, what was the most challenging thing you had to do this year as part of the mini boat program?
I actually don't know.
How was it working with the other teammates of yours, Danielle?
Okay, I guess.
Did you guys ever get into little disagreements?
Yeah, he got distracted very, very easily.
What did you think about having to ask your classmates questions? I noticed in your video you were having to interact and trying to get answers out of your classmates. What was that experience like for you?
Good. They did get a little moody. Some of them got a little moody because I was pulling them away. But otherwise, it was pretty good.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I will tell you that in everyday world, you have to work with all types of coworkers. Sometimes they don't get much sleep or they have other things going on, and you just have to learn how to get along with everybody. So again, you're learning some real world experience. So Nate, for you, how do the kids decide where to send their mini boat from? It seems like that's a really complex thing that they need to figure out. And we've heard a little bit about they look at ocean and wind currents, but is there, other agencies that help out? How do they get their mini boat onto a Coast Guard boat, for instance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, I have zero say about where a mini boat gets launched. That's the most important part to me of this program is it's 100% student led. So they tell me where they want to launch it from, and then we brainstorm some ideas about some different vessels that could actually help them launch their mini boat. And I can tell you right now, which I tell the students, nobody has ever turned us down about launching a mini boat. We've launched mini boats off of U.S. Coast Guard vessels, a few different ones. We've launched them off of a University of Alaska research vessel, Oregon State University research vessel, an undersea freighter that lays fiber optic cables, a fishing boat, you name it, we've launched a mini boat from it.
That's wonderful. You're building such great relationships with our region. So kind of on that note, as you're building those relationships with the students in Japan, can you share a little bit more about how that came to be and how your role is when you go over there and deliver the boat that's launched from Japan?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things of this program is the way that we're able to have students on both sides of the ocean learn about each other and their cultures. And next week, you're actually going to hear from some of our Japanese students. But, I don't speak Japanese more than a couple of words, and a lot of the Japanese students don't speak a whole lot of English. And even though we have an interpreter who works for the city of Hachinohe in Japan who will interpret, usually we just kind of elbow her out of the way. And the students and I were communicating with hand gestures. And there's something there with students where there may be a language barrier, but we're able to communicate and play games and laugh and joke. And let's just say a smile is a smile in any language.
Wonderful. So I will share with us, we have a couple of updates from Mr. Boken and Mrs. Lewis about that boat that we saw get relaunched. It's gone about 3/4 of a mile already. In the short time that we saw it go back into the river and now. So, wow. it is trekking along. The winds must be good today, Trina. Another question for you, Nate. If a boat happens to be discovered on an island or it crashes somewhere before it gets to Japan, or a Japanese boat before it gets to North America, what happens?
Well, that's another great question. I make a promise to the students at the beginning of the school year when their boats are being launched is no matter where this boat goes, where it crashes, if it needs help and I can't get somebody to help, then I will physically travel there and rescue that boat. And so far, I've had to travel to a little tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and I've got to travel up to Alaska and make some repairs with these boats with other students in those areas. And that's kind of the fun part, Elisa, is when the boat crashes, we're able to engage with the people in that local area. So, we've had villagers and who live in palm tree huts find our boats and help us. And we've had 7th graders in Alaska, and we've had elementary school students in Baja, Mexico. And that's the really fun thing about the program is finding everybody together. But we haven't had a mini boat hit Hawaii yet, and we're hoping maybe one does.
Oh, Nate, wonderful. You and Mr. Boken will have so many grand adventures rescuing these mini boats. One of the things that you just shared goes to a question that was actually posed for Pacific Power, which was what do we admire most about this program? And I think I can speak on behalf of Pacific Power and just say the thing that we really most admire is really the skills that this is teaching students, that they are working together. As you heard from our student shipbuilders, sometimes when you're working in a group, you have to figure out the best solution and reach a common agreement. You're also learning skills that are just so valuable for the real world. There are so many opportunities that this program provides, whether that's an opportunity to learn about a meteorologist and what does a meteorologist do. I mean, these are things that we're learning right here on the fly, and that is such a great opportunity for students to understand what maritime sciences is, and also just to discover different opportunities that they may want to pursue in a future career. So Nate, one more question for you. What is the best thing about working with these students?
So I can tell you the worst day doing mini boats is better than the best day sitting in your office. These students give me so much energy, and it's amazing because, again, we're not telling them what to do, right? We give them the tools, we give them advice, we're there for support, but they're doing it on their own. And just to take a step back and see these 5th graders who are acting more mature than a lot of adults that I know in these situations, just to see their ideas come together and then to form a team and the way that their whole class comes together. I'm going to tell you, Lisa, I'm not much of a crier, but there are many times on the way home from a mini boat school that I'm thinking about the amazing things that I saw, the way these students come together and treat each other so well. I might have a drop or two come down my eye on the way home. That's how much these students come together, and that's what I think the mini boat program is all about.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we couldn't, at Pacific Power, we couldn't agree more. I think one of the things we'd like to do is maybe cut back to the boat and say, see Mr. Boken one last time with Mrs. Lewis to say a farewell before we wrap up.
Excellent.
Hello. All
Hi,
right.
Mr. Boken.
Hello.
How's our boat doing?
So she's doing great. She is probably cruising past the port of Kalama right now. We're looking downriver towards Kalama. You can't see those big ships anymore because she was moving so fast that we couldn't keep up with her.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this second chance, well, maybe third chance opportunity for this boat, or maybe even 8th, because you did a lot of rescuing over the weekend. Thank you so much for everybody joining us today. Thank you, Nate, for your fascinating lesson with that marshmallow. Thanks to our friends at the National Weather Service, Educational Passages, and of course, our student shipbuilders for joining us.
I hope you'll all join us for our final live stream, which will be next Friday, June 12th, where we'll be learning about the mighty Columbia. This is when we will explore a working river and how it works, and talk more about all of the important things that the region's biggest river does for us. We'll be here at the same time, noon to 1. Until then, you can check back to see the progress of all of the mini boats on the Mini Boat Facebook page at CRMM Mini Boat Program. Thanks again so much for joining us. This is Elisa signing off until next week.